Lately I've been talking about Linux. One of the great advantages to Linux is that it's open source. In addition to being free, it's open source. What does that mean? Open source means... excuse me just for a second while I... my apologies. Open source means that anybody can take a look at it. Anybody can go into Linux, take a look at it, play with it, change it, do whatever you want. In fact, if you want an example of open source, Morphix is based on Debian Linux, so it's a distribution that's based on another distribution of Linux. Another example of this is Mint Linux, which is based on Ubuntu Linux. So there's one distribution's based on another distribution, and that's because of the fact that it's open source and it's free, and anybody can go in and take a look and tinker with it and do whatever they want. On the opposite side of the spectrum, we have Microsoft Windows. Everybody knows about Microsoft Windows. Duh! Everybody knows about Windows. The issue that Windows has is the fact that it's not open source. As long as you're a root user in Linux, you can access any part of the system you want, right down to the kernel, which is the core of the system. The root user is essentially, excuse me, pardon. It basically is like this. The root of a tree is the very bottom of the tree, so the root user is he has access to the very core of the system. Above the roots, you obviously have the trunk, and this is where your user interface is. And beyond your trunk, you have your open source applications on the branches. So it's kind of like a tree, so that's basically what I mean when I say root user. It's the man, it's the big cheese when it comes to being able to access your system. But back to open source. Sorry for trailing off. Microsoft is not open source. They don't let you gain access to the root of the system. In fact, if you try to enter at least I think it used to be, I don't know what the story is in Vista, but I know in XP, when I first powered up my handheld, I seem to recall when I entered the hard drive, it brought up a dialog saying, this area contains folders that keep your system in place or something like that. We recommend that you do not enter this area. And they do this for a reason. And it's not so much that they don't want people tinkering with it as they don't want people tinkering with it. Basically, they don't want people tinkering with it because of two reasons. And it's not so much that they don't want alterations done to Windows, it's that they don't want people that may not know what they're doing to go in there, try to find a document, for example, and find what they think is a document that they don't want, delete it, and then all of a sudden find out that they deleted a critical system file that impairs the ability of your system to run efficiently. So that's why they cut it off. But at the same time, I think that's a bit of a bar from, you know, if you want to make alterations to the system, you basically can't unless you really know what you're doing. And the only people that really know what they're doing are the programmers within Microsoft and those companies that are closely entangled with Microsoft. But open source, again, it's basically open. You know, that's what it is. It's a source that is open. That means, again, anybody can go in and take a look around, play with it, do whatever the heck you want to it. Like I said, distributions are based on other distributions of Linux. This is because it is open source. This is because of the huge benefit of it being open source. Another benefit of open source is the fact that it security companies like to look over this stuff on a regular basis. In fact, it is so they're so up on what's going on in the community as far as Linux and viruses and so forth. To say that it's impossible to get a virus on Linux is a fallacy, because it's not impossible to get a virus on any system, but it's a heck of a lot less likely to do it on Linux than it is on Windows. And one of the pluses is, again, this is open. It's open source. It's anybody can take a look at it. And the plus to this is that the people that are in charge of keeping the viruses at bay can go into Linux and take a look and make any corrections, build the patches, literally within 24 to 48 hours of a report of a virus, which means that odds are the virus may never come into contact with the Linux system. But yeah, that's basically what open source is. It is a source that is open. Anybody can go in, take a look at it, and it's all free. It's fantastic. I love open source. That's pretty much it. Any comments or questions are welcome. Thank you for watching, and have a nice evening.